Chapter 6 of He Can Who Thinks He Can by Orison Swett Marden. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Spirit in Which You Work. It ought not be necessary to ask a man if he likes his work. The radiance of his face should tell that. His very buoyancy and pride in his task, his spirit of unbounded enthusiasm and zest ought to show it. He ought to be so in love with his work that he finds his greatest delight in it. And this inward joy should light up his whole being. A test of the quality of the individual is the spirit in which he does his work. If he goes to it grudgingly, like a slave under the lash, if he feels the drudgery in it, if his enthusiasm and love for it do not lift it out of commonness and make it a delight instead of a bore, he will never make a very great place for himself in the world. The man who feels his life yoke galling him, who does not understand why the bread and butter question could not have been solved by one great creative act instead of every man's being obliged to wrench everything he gets from nature through hard work. The man who does not see a beneficent design and a superb necessity in the principle that every one should earn his own living, has gotten a wrong view of life, and will never get the splendid results out of his vocation that were intended for him. Multitudes of people do not half respect their work. They look upon it as a disagreeable necessity for providing bread and butter, clothing and shelter, as unavoidable drudgery, instead of as a great man-builder, a great life university for the development of manhood and womanhood. They do not see the divinity in the spur of necessity which compels man to develop the best thing in him, to unfold his possibilities by his struggle to attain his ambition, to conquer the enemies of his prosperity and his happiness. They cannot see the curse in the unearned dollar, which takes the spur out of the motive. Work to them is sheer drudgery, an unmitigated evil. They cannot understand why the Creator did not put bread ready-made on trees. They do not see the stamina, the grit, the nobility, and the manhood in being forced to conquer what they get. No one can make a real success of his life when he is all the time grumbling or apologizing for what he is doing. It is a confession of weakness. What a pitiable sight to see one of God's noblemen, made to hold up his head and be a king, to be cheerful and happy and to radiate power, going about whining and complaining of his work, even deploring the fact that he should have to work at all. It is demoralizing to allow yourself to do a thing in a half-hearted, grudging manner. There is a great adaptive power in human nature. The mind is wonderfully adjustive to different conditions, but you will not get the best results until your mind is settled, until you are resolved not only to like your work, but also to do it in the spirit of a master and not in that of a slave. Resolve that, whatever you do, you will bring the whole man to it, that you will fling the whole weight of your being into it, that you will do it in the spirit of a conqueror, and so get the lesson and power out of it which come only to the conqueror. Put the right spirit into your work. Treat your calling as divine, as a call from principle. If the thing itself be not important, the spirit in which you take hold of it makes all the difference in the world to you. It can make or mar the man. You cannot afford grumbling service or botched work in your life's record. You cannot afford to form a habit of half-doing things, or of doing them in the spirit of a drudge, for this will drag its slimy trail through all your subsequent career, always humiliating you at the most unexpected times. Let other people do the poor jobs, the botched work, if they will. Keep your standards up, your ideals high. The attitude with which a man approaches his task has everything to do with the quality and efficiency of his work, and with its influence upon his character. What a man does is a part of himself. It is the expression of what he stands for. Our life work is an outpicturing of our ambition, our ideals, our real selves. If you see a man's work, you see the man. No one can respect himself or have that sublime faith in himself which is essential to all high achievement, when he puts mean, half-hearted, slipshod service into what he does. He cannot get his highest self-approval until he does his level best. No man can do his best or call out the highest thing in him while he regards his occupation as drudgery or a bore. Under no circumstances allow yourself to do anything as a drudge. Nothing is more demoralizing. No matter if circumstances force you to do something which is distasteful, compel yourself to find something interesting and instructive in it. Everything that is necessary to be done is full of interest. It is all a question of the attitude of mind in which we go to our task. If your occupation is distasteful, every rebellious thought, every feeling of disgust, only surrounds you with a failure atmosphere which is sure to attract more failure. The magnet that brings success and happiness must be charged with a positive, optimistic, enthusiastic force. The man who has not learned the secret of taking the drudgery out of his task by flinging his whole soul into it, has not learned the first principles of success or happiness. It is perfectly possible to so exalt the most ordinary business, by bringing to it the spirit of a master, as to make of it a dignified vocation. The trouble with us is that we drop into a humdrum existence and do our work mechanically, with no heart, no vim, and no purpose. We do not learn the fine art of living for growth, for mind and soul expansion. We just exist. It was not intended that any necessary employment should be merely commonplace. There is a great, deep meaning in it all, a glory in it. Our possibilities, our destiny are in it, and the good of the world. Why is it that most people think that the glory of life does not belong to the ordinary vocations, that this belongs to the artist, to the musician, to the writer, or to someone of the more gentle and what they call dignified professions? There is as much dignity and grandeur and glory in agriculture as in statesmanship or authorship. Some people never see any beauty anywhere. They have no soul for the beautiful. Others see it everywhere. Farming to one man is a humdrum existence, an unbearable vocation, a monotonous routine, while another sees the glory and the dignity in it, and takes infinite pleasure in mixing brains with the soil and in working with the Creator to produce grander results. I knew a cobbler in a little village who took infinitely more pride in his vocation than did the lawyer, or even the clergyman of that town. I know a farmer who takes more pride in his crops than any other person in his community takes in his calling. He walks over his farm as proudly as a monarch might travel through his kingdom. This true master farmer will introduce his visitor to his horses and cows and other animals as though they were important personages. That is the kind of enthusiasm that takes the drudgery out of the farm and makes a joy out of life, which to many is so dull and commonplace. I have known a stenographer, on small pay, who put a higher quality of effort into her work than the proprietor of the great establishment she worked for, and she got more out of life than he did. I knew a school teacher, in a little district 25 miles from a railroad, in a schoolhouse right in the forest, who took more pride in her work and in the progress of her pupils than some presidents of colleges whom I've known appeared to take in their duties. A girl who declared that she never would do housework, that she never would cook, no matter what misfortunes might come to her, married a man who lost his money, and she was forced to part with her servants and to do the cooking herself for the family. She thought she never could do it, but she determined to make bread-making an art, to elevate cooking and make it a science in her home, and she succeeded. No matter how humble your work may seem, do it in the spirit of an artist, of a master. In this way you lift it out of commonness and rob it of what would otherwise be drudgery. You will find that learning to thoroughly respect everything you do, and not to let it go out of your hands until it has the stamp of your approval upon it as a trademark, will have a wonderful effect upon your whole character. The quality of your work will have a great deal to do with the quality of your life. If your work quality is down, your character will be down, your standards down, your ideals down. The habit of insisting upon the best of which you are capable, and of always demanding of yourself the highest, never accepting the lowest, will make all the difference between mediocrity or failure and a successful career. If you bring your work to the spirit of an artist instead of an artisan, if you bring a burning zeal, an all-absorbing enthusiasm. If you determine to put the best there is in everything you do, no matter what it is, you will not long be troubled with a sense of drudgery. Everything depends on the spirit we bring to the task. The right spirit makes an artist in the humblest task, while the wrong spirit makes an artisan in any calling, no matter how high that calling may be. There is a dignity, an indescribable quality of superiority in everything we do which we thoroughly and honestly respect. There is nothing belittling or menial which has to be done for the welfare of the race. You cannot afford to give the mere dregs, the mere leavings of your energies to your work. The best in you is none too good for it. It is only when we do our best, when we put joy, energy, enthusiasm, and zeal into our work, that we really grow, and this is the only way we can keep our highest self-respect. We cannot think much of ourselves when we are not honest in our work, when we are not doing our level best. There is nothing which will compensate you for the loss of faith in yourself, for the knowledge of your reputation for doing bungling, dishonest work. You have something infinitely higher within you to satisfy than to make a mere living, to get through your day's work as easily as possible. It is your sense of right, the demand within you to do your level best, to develop the highest thing in you, to do the square thing, to be a man. This should speak so loudly in you that the mere bread-and-butter question, the money-making question, should be absolutely insignificant in comparison. Start out with a tacit understanding with yourself that you will be a man at all hazards, that your work shall express the highest and best things in you, and that you cannot afford to debase or demoralize yourself by appealing to the lowest, the most despicable, mean side of yourself by deteriorating, by botching your work. How often we see people working along without purpose, half committed to their aim, only intending to pursue their vocation until they strike snags. They intend to keep at it as long as it is tolerable, or until they find something they like better. This is a cowardly way to face a life work which determines our destiny. A man ought to approach his life task, however humble, with the high ideals that characterize a great master as he approaches the canvas upon which he is going to put his masterpiece, with a resolution to make no false moves that will mar the model that lives in his ideal. A sacred thing, this approaching the uncut marble of life. We cannot afford to strike any false blows which might mar the angle that sleeps in the stone, for the image we produce must represent our life work. Whether it is beautiful or hideous, divine or brutal, it must stand as an expression of ourselves, as representing our ideals. It always pains me to see a young person approaching his life work with carelessness and indifference, as though it did not make much difference to him how he did his work if he only got through with it and got his pay for it. How little the average youth realizes the sacredness, the dignity, the divinity of his calling. There is a higher meaning, something broader, deeper, and nobler in a vocation than making a living or seeking fame. Making a life is the best thing in it. It should be a man developer, a character builder, and a great life school for broadening, deepening, and rounding into symmetry, harmony, and beauty all the God-given faculties within us. The part of our life work which gives us a living, which provides the bread and butter and clothes and houses and shelter, is merely incidental to the great disciplinary, educative phase of it, the self-unfoldment. It is a question of how large and how grand a man or woman you can bring out of your vocation, not how much money there is in it. Your life work is your statue. You cannot get away from it. It is beautiful or hideous, lovely or ugly, inspiring or debasing, as you make it. It will elevate or degrade. You can no more get away from it than you can, of your own volition, rise from the earth. Every errand you do, every letter you write, every piece of merchandise you sell, every conversation, every thought of yours, everything you do or think is a blow of the chisel which mars or beautifies the statue. The attitude of mind with which we perform our life work colors the whole career and determines the quality of the destiny. It is the lofty ideal that redeems the life from the curse of commonness, and imparts a touch of nobility to every calling. But a low, sordid aim will take the dignity out of any occupation. End of chapter 6. Chapter 7 of He Can Who Thinks He Can, by Orison Swett Marden. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Responsibility develops power. There is enough latent force in a Maximite torpedo shell to tear a warship to pieces. But the amount of force or explosive power in one of these terrific engines of destruction could never be ascertained by any ordinary concussion. Children could play with it for years, pound it, roll it about, and do all sorts of things with it. The shell might be shot through the walls of an ordinary building without arousing its terrible dynamic energy. It must be fired from a cannon with terrific force, through a foot or so of steel plate armor, before it meets with resistance great enough to evoke its mighty explosive power. Every man is a stranger to his greatest strength, his mightiest power, until the test of a great responsibility, a critical emergency, or a supreme crisis in his life calls it out. Work on a farm, hauling wood, working in a tannery, storekeeping, West Point, the Mexican War, doing odd jobs about town, were not enough to arouse the sleeping giant in General Grant. There is no probability that he would ever have been heard of from outside his own little community but for the emergency of the Civil War. There was a tremendous dynamic force in the man, but it required the concussion of the great Civil War to ignite it. No ordinary occasion touched his slumbering power. No ordinary experience could ignite the powder in this giant. Under common circumstances he would have gone through life a stranger to his own ability, just as most of the great dynamite shells now in existence will probably never be exploded because of the lack of a war emergency great enough to explode them. Farming, wood chopping, rail splitting, surveying, storekeeping, the state legislature, the practice of law, not even the United States Congress, furnished occasions great enough, resistance strong enough, to ignite the spark of power, to explode the dynamic force in Abraham Lincoln. Only the responsibility of a nation in imminent peril furnished sufficient concussion to ignite the giant powder in perhaps the greatest man that ever trod the American continent. There is no probability that Lincoln would have gone down in history as a very great man but for the crisis of the Civil War. The nation's peril was the responsibility thrust upon him which brought out the last ounce of his reserves, his latent power of achievement, the resources which he never would have dreamed he possessed but for this emergency. Some of the greatest men in history never discovered themselves until they lost everything but their pluck and grit, or until some great misfortune overtook them and they were driven to desperation to invent a way out of their dilemma. Giants are made in the stern school of necessity. The strong, vigorous, forceful, stalwart men who have pushed civilization upward are the products of self-help. They have not been pushed or boosted, but they have fought every inch of the way up to their own loaf. They are giants because they have been great conquerors of difficulties, supreme masters of difficult situations. They have acquired the strength of the obstacles which they have overcome. Many of our giant businessmen never got a glimpse of their real power until some great panic or misfortune swept their property away and knocked the crutches out from under them. Many men and women never discovered their ability until everything they thought would help them to success had been taken away from them, until they had been stripped of everything that they held dear in life. Our greatest power, our highest possibility, lies so deep in our natures that it often takes a tremendous emergency, a powerful crisis, to call it out. It is only when we feel that all bridges behind us are burned, all retreat cut off, and that we have no outside aid to lean upon, that we discover our full inherent power. As long as we get outside help, we never know our own resources. How many young men and young women owe their success to some great misfortune, which cut off a competence, death of a relative, the loss of business or home, or some other great calamity, which threw them on their own resources, and compelled them to fight for themselves. Responsibility is a great power developer. Where there is responsibility, there is growth. People who are never thrust into responsible positions never develop their real strength. This is one reason why it is so rare to find very strong men and women among those who have spent their lives in subordinate positions, in the service of others. They go through life comparative weaklings because their powers have never been tested or developed by having great responsibility thrust upon them. Their thinking has been done for them. They have simply carried out somebody else's program. They have never learned to stand alone, to think for themselves, to act independently. Because they have never been obliged to plan for themselves, they have never developed the best things in them. Their power of originality, inventiveness, initiative, independence, self-reliance, their possible grit and stamina. The power to create, to make combinations, to meet emergencies. The power which comes from continuous marshalling of one's forces to meet difficult situations, to adjust means to ends. That stamina or power which makes one equal to the great crisis in the life of a nation is only developed by years of practical training under great responsibility. There is nothing more misleading than the philosophy that if there is anything in a youth it will come out. It may come out, and it may not. It depends largely upon circumstances, upon the presence or absence of an ambition-arousing, a grit-awakening environment. The greatest ability is not always accompanied by the greatest confidence or the greatest ambition. There is at this moment enough power latent in the clerks or ordinary employees in almost any of our business houses to manage them as well as, or better than they are being managed today, if the opportunity and necessary emergency to call out this dynamic force should arise. But how can clerks who remain behind counters, measuring cloth, selling shoes or hosiery, year in and year out, ever know what latent power for organization, what executive ability or initiative they possess? It is true that some of the more ambitious and courageous get out and start for themselves, but it does not follow that they are always abler than those who remain behind. Sometimes the greatest ability is accompanied by great modesty and even timidity. Then again, employees conscious of great ability are often deferred from taking the risk of launching out for themselves because of possible disaster to those depending upon them for daily bread. But thrust great responsibility upon a man, drive him to desperation, and the demand will bring out what there is in him. It will call out his initiative, his ingenuity, his resourcefulness, his self-reliance, his power to adjust means to ends. If there are any elements of leadership in him, responsibility will call them out. It will test his power to do things. I have in mind a young man who developed such amazing ability within 6 months from the date of a very important promotion that he surprised everybody who knew him. Even his best friends did not believe that it was in him. But the great responsibilities, the desperate situation thrust upon him brought out his reserve power, and he very quickly showed of what stuff he was made. This promotion, and a little stock in the concern, which had been given him, aroused his ambition and called out a mighty power which before he did not dream he possessed. Tens of thousands of young men and young women today are only waiting for a chance to show themselves, waiting for an opportunity to try their wings. And when the opportunity, the responsibility comes, they will be equal to anything that confronts them. Proprietors of large concerns are often very much exercised by the death of a superintendent or lieutenant who was managed with exceptional ability. They are fearful that very disastrous results may follow, and believe it will be almost impossible to fill his place, but while they are looking around to find a man big enough for the place, someone perhaps, who was under the former chief, attends to his duties temporarily, and makes even a better manager than his predecessor. Young men and young women are rising out of the ranks constantly, everywhere, who fill these positions oftentimes much better than those who drop out, and whose places it was thought almost impossible to fill. Do not be afraid to pile responsibility upon your employees. You will be amazed to see how quickly they will get out from under their load, and what unexpected ability they will develop. Many employers are always looking for people outside of their own establishment to fill important vacancies, simply because they cannot see or appreciate a man's ability until he has actually demonstrated it. But how can he demonstrate it until he has the chance? There are probably today scores of young men in every one of our great business houses who are as capable as the present heads. There is no position that cannot be filled as well or better than it's being filled now, by someone who is still in the ranks, and who has not yet been heard from in any distinctive way. When some great statesman falls, the people often look about, to find that there is apparently no one to fill his place, but from an unexpected source, perhaps from a little out-of-the-way town, from the common ranks, there comes a man who is equal to the emergency. The way to bring out the reserve in a man is to pile responsibility upon him. If there is anything in him, this will reveal it. Some of us never quite come to ourselves in fullness and power until driven to desperation. It is when we are shipwrecked, like Robinson Crusoe upon an island, with nothing but our own brain and hands, nothing but resources locked up deep in ourselves, that we really come to complete self-discovery. A captain never knows what is in his men until they have been tested by a gale at sea which threatens shipwreck. That there are great potencies and power possibilities within us which we may never know is proved by the tremendous forces that are aroused in ordinary people in some great crisis or emergency. The elevator boy may have never dreamed that there was anything heroic in his nature. He may never have thought there was a possibility of his rising in the world to the importance of the men whom he lifted to their offices. But the building takes fire, and this boy, who was seldom noticed by anyone, who did not show any special signs of ability, in a few minutes develops the most heroic qualities. He runs his elevator up through the burning floors when choked with smoke, the hot cable blistering his hands, and rescues 100 people who but for him might have lost their lives. A ship is wrecked at sea, and a poor immigrant becomes the hero of the hour, commanding a lifeboat and giving orders with calmness, authority, and force, when others have lost their heads. A hospital takes fire, and the delicate, timid girl invalid develops into a heroine almost instantly and does a giant's work. In fires and wrecks, in great disasters or emergencies of all kinds, are enacted deeds of daring and of sublime heroism which, before the great test came, would have been thought impossible by those who did them. No one ever knows just how much dynamic force there is in him until tested by a great emergency or a supreme crisis. Oftentimes men reach middle life and even later before they discover themselves. Until some great emergency, loss, or sorrow has tested their timber, they cannot tell how much strain they can stand. No emergency great enough to call out their latent power ever before confronted them, and they did not themselves realize what they would be equal to until the great crisis confronted them. I have known several instances where daughters reared in luxury were suddenly thrown upon their own resources by the death of their parents and the loss of their inherited fortunes. They had not been brought up to work, did not know how to do anything useful, had no trade and no idea how to earn a livelihood, and yet all at once they developed marvelous ability for doing things. The power was there, latent, but responsibility had not hitherto been thrust upon them. Young men suddenly forced into positions of tremendous responsibility by accident or death are often not the same men in 6 months. They have developed strong, manly qualities which no one ever dreamed they possessed. Responsibility has made men of them, and it makes women of inexperienced and untried girls who are suddenly thrust into an emergency where they are obliged to conduct a business or support a family. Many people distrust their initiative because they have not had an opportunity to exercise it. The monotonous routine of doing the same work year in and year out does not tend to develop new faculties. All the mental powers must be exercised, strengthened, before we can measure their possibilities. I know young men who believe in everybody but themselves. They seem to have no doubt about other people accomplishing what they undertake, but are always shaky about themselves. "Oh, do not put me at the head of this or that. Somebody else can do it better than I." They shrink from responsibility because they lack self-faith. The only way to develop power is to resolve early in life never to let an opportunity for doing so go by. Never shrink from anything which will give you more discipline, better training, and enlarged experience. No matter how distasteful, force yourself into it. There is nothing like responsibility for developing ability. Never mind if the position is hard. Take it and make up your mind that you are going to fill it better than it was ever before filled. I once heard a man say he regretted more than anything else in his life that he had indulged his natural inclination to decline every position of responsibility offered him. He was naturally so shy that any position which attracted attention or gave him the least publicity was distasteful to him. His magnificent possibilities remain undeveloped because he has never had that responsibility which calls out one's reserves and develops his latent powers. Many a time he thought he would change his course, and made up his mind never to let another opportunity for self-development go by him unimproved. But the habit of delaying until he should be better prepared got such a hold of him that he could not change. The result is that, although he is a man of recognized power, with a superb mind, his life has been an extremely quiet one, very tame and unimportant compared with what it would have been had he made it a rule to thrust himself into every position of responsibility which would have called out the best in him. Many people never discover themselves or know their possibilities because they always shrink from responsibility. They lease themselves to somebody else and die with their greatest possibilities unreleased, undeveloped. Personally, I believe it is the duty of every young person to have an ambition to be independent, to be his own master, and to resolve that he will not be at somebody else's call all his life, come and go at the sounding of a gong or the touch of a bell, that he will at least belong to himself, that he will be an entire wheel and not a cog, that he will be a whole machine, although it may be a small one, rather than part of someone else's machine. The very stretching of the mind toward high ideals, the looking forward to the time when we shall be our own masters, working along the lines of a resolution, a fixed, irrevocable determination, has a strengthening, unifying influence upon all the faculties. And you will be a stronger man or woman, whatever your future, if you keep steadily, persistently in your mind your own individual declaration of independence. It means freedom, it means delivery from restraint, from a certain feeling of slavery which attaches to every subordinate position. I do not believe that it is possible for anyone to reach the same magnitude of manhood or womanhood, to grow to the same stature, after giving up the struggle for absolute independence, or the hope of going into business or profession, or something else all of one's own. It is true that not every person has the executive ability or strength of mind, the qualities of leadership, the moral stamina, or the push to conduct a business successfully for himself and stand his ground. There are also many instances of young men who have others dependent upon them, and who are not in a position to take the risks of going into business for themselves. A great many, however, work for others merely because they do not dare to take the risk of starting on their own responsibility. They lack the courage to branch out. The fear of possible failure deters them. Moreover, a great many start as boys in certain occupations, work up to a fairly good salary, and though they may be ambitious to be independent, are yet held back by the distrust of their own powers and the advice of others to let well enough alone, until the habit of doing the same thing year in and year out becomes so fixed that it is very difficult to wrench themselves out of their environment. Again, a great many people prefer a small certainty to a big uncertainty. There is no disposition to hazard, no desire to take risks, in their make-up. They do not want to assume large responsibilities. They prefer steady employment, and the certainty that every Saturday night they will find fixed sums in their pay envelopes, to the great risks, responsibilities, and uncertainties of a business of their own. You may not have the ambition, the desire, or the inclination to take responsibility. You may prefer to have an easier life, and to let somebody else worry about the payment of notes and debts, the hard times, the dull seasons, and the panics. But if you expect to bring out the greatest possibilities in you, if growth, with the largest possible expansion of your powers, is your goal, You cannot realize your ambition in the fullest and completest sense while merely trying to carry out somebody else's program and letting him furnish the ideas. There must be a sense of complete independence, not partial but complete, in order to reach the highest growth. We do not attain our full stature of manhood or womanhood in captivity or in slavery, but in freedom, in absolute liberty. The eagle must be let out of the cage, no matter how large or how comfortable, before it can exhibit all the powers of an eagle. It is the locked-up forces within, that lie deep in our natures, not those which are on the surface, that test our mettle. It is within everybody's power to call out these hidden forces, to be somebody, and to do something worthwhile in the world, and the man who does not do it is violating his sacred birthright. Every man or woman who goes through the world with a great continence of undiscovered possibilities locked up within him commits a sin against himself, and that which borders on a crime against civilization. Don't be afraid to trust yourself. Have faith in your own ability to think along original lines. If there is anything in you, self-reliance will bring it out. Whatever you do, cultivate a spirit of manly independence in doing it. Let your work express yourself. Don't be a mere cog in a machine. Do your own thinking and carry out your own ideas as far as possible, even though working for another. End of chapter 7. Chapter 8 of He Can Who Thinks He Can by Orison Swett Marden. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. An overmastering purpose. Before water generates steam, it must register 212 degrees of heat. 200 degrees will not do it. 210 will not do it. The water must boil before it will generate enough steam to move an engine, to run a train. Lukewarm water will not run anything. A great many people are trying to move their life trains with lukewarm water, or water that's almost boiling, and they are wondering why they are stalled, why they cannot get ahead. They are trying to run a boiler with 200 or 210 degrees of heat, and they cannot understand why they do not get anywhere. Lukewarmness in his work stands in the same relation to a man's achievement as lukewarm water does to the locomotive boiler. No man can hope to accomplish anything great in this world until he throws his whole soul, flings the force of his whole life into it. In Philip Brooks's talks to young people, he used to urge them to be something with all their might. It is not enough simply to have a desire to be something. There is but one way to accomplish it, and that is, to strive to be somebody with all the concentrated energy we can muster. Any kind of human being can wish for a thing, can desire it, but only strong, vigorous minds with great purposes can do things. There is an infinite distance between the wishers and the doers. A mere desire is lukewarm water, which never will take a train to its destination. The purpose must boil, must be made into live steam to do the work. Who would ever have heard of Theodore Roosevelt outside his immediate community if he had only half committed himself to what he had undertaken, if he had brought only a part of himself to his task? The great secret of his career has been that he has flung his whole life, not a part of it, with all the determination and energy and power he could muster, into everything he has undertaken. No dilly-dallying, no faint-hearted efforts, no lukewarm purpose for him. Every life of power must have a great master purpose which takes precedence of all other motives, a supreme principle which is so commanding and so imperative in its demands for recognition and exercise that there can be no mistaking its call. Without this the water of energy will never reach the boiling point. The life train will not get anywhere. The man with a vigorous purpose is a positive, constructive, creative force. No one can be resourceful, inventive, original, or creative without powerful concentration, and the undivided focusing of the mind is only possible along the line of ambition, the life purpose. We cannot focus the mind upon a thing we are not interested in and enthusiastic about. A man ought to look upon his career as a great artist looks upon his masterpiece, as an outpicturing of his best self, upon which he dwells with infinite pride and a satisfaction which nothing else can give. Yet many people are so loosely connected with their vocation that they are easily separated from it. I know young men who seem anxious to get on in their careers, but in a single evening they could be induced to give up their calling for something else. They are always wondering whether they are in the right place, or where their ability will count most. They lose heart when they strike obstacles, or they become discouraged when they hear of someone else who has made a success in some other line, and wonder if they had not better try something in the same line. If one is so loosely attached to his occupation that he can be easily induced to give it up, you may be sure that he is not in the right place. If nature has called you to a position, if the call runs in your blood, it is a part of your life and you cannot get away from it. It is not a separate thing from yourself. It exists in every brain cell, every nerve cell, every blood corpuscle contains some of it. You can no more get away from it than a leopard can get away from his spots. So when a young man asks me if I do not think he had better make a change, I feel very certain that he is not in the place God called him to, for the thing he was made for is as much a part of his real being as his temperament. It is nearer to him than his heartbeat, closer than his breath. There is a photograph of the thing he was made for in every cell in his body. He cannot get away from it. The thing which will make the life distinctive, which will make it a power, is the one supreme thing which we want to do, and feel that we must do, and no matter how long we may be delayed from this aim, or how far we may be swerved aside by mistakes or iron circumstances, we should never give up hope or a determination to pursue our object. Some people have not the moral courage, the persistence, the force of character, to get the things out of the way which stand between them and their ambition. They allow themselves to be pushed this way and that way into things for which they have no fitness or taste. Their willpower is not strong enough to enable them to fight their way to their goal. They are pushed aside by the pressure about them, and do the things for which they have little or no liking or adaptation. If there's anything in the world a person should fight for, it is freedom to pursue his ideal, because in that is his great opportunity for self-expression, for the unfoldment of the greatest thing possible to him. It is his great chance to make his life tell in the largest, completest way, to do the most original, distinctive thing possible to him. If he does not pursue his ideal, does not carry out his supreme aim, his life will be more or less a failure, no matter how much he may be actuated by a sense of duty, or how much he may exert his willpower to overcome his handicap. There is great power in a resolution that has no reservation in it, a strong, persistent, tenacious purpose which burns all bridges behind it, clears all obstacles from its path, and arrives at its goal no matter how long it may take, no matter what the sacrifice or the cost. The inspiration of a great, positive aim transforms the life, and revolutionizes a shiftless, ambitionless, dissipated, good-for-nothing man, as if some divine energy had worked in him, even as love sometimes transforms a slovenly, purposeless, coarse man into a clean, methodical, diviner being. When the awakening power of a new purpose, a resolute aim, is born in a man, he is a new creature. He sees everything in a new light, the doubts, the fears, the apathy, the vicious temptations which dogged his steps but yesterday, the stagnation which had blighted his past life, all vanish as if by magic. They are dispelled by the breath of a new purpose. Beauty and system take the place of unsightliness and confusion. Order reigns in the place of anarchy. All his slumbering faculties awaken to activity. The effect of this new ambition is like the clarifying change made by a waterway in a stagnant, swampy district. The water clarifies as soon as it begins to move, to do something. Flowers spring up in place of poisonous weeds, and vegetation, beauty, birds and song make joyous the once miasmic atmosphere. Chemists tell us that when a compound is broken up and an atom is released from the attraction of other atoms, it takes on a new energy and immediately seeks combination with another free atom. But the longer it remains alone, the weaker it becomes. It seems to lose much of its vitality and power of attraction when idle. When the atom is first freed from the grasp of its fellows, it is called nascent, new-born. It is then that it has its maximum of gripping power, and if it finds a free atom immediately after it is released, it will unite with it with greater vigor than ever. The power seems to go out of it if it delays its union with another atom. Mythology tells us that Minerva, the goddess of wisdom, sprang complete, full-orbed, full-grown from Jupiter's brain. Man's highest conception, his most effective thought, most inventive and resourceful ideas, and grandest visions spring full-orbed, complete, with their maximum of power, spontaneously from the brain. Men who postpone their visions, who delay the execution of their ideas, who bottle up their thoughts to be used at a more convenient time, are always weaklings. The forceful, vigorous, effective men are those who execute their ideas while they are full of enthusiasm of inspiration. Our ideas, our visions, our resolutions come to us fresh every day, because this is the divine program for the day, not for tomorrow. Another inspiration, new ideas will come tomorrow. Today, we should carry out the inspiration of the day. A divine vision flashes across the artist's mind with lightning-like rapidity, but it is not convenient for him to seize his brush and fasten the immortal vision before it fades. He keeps turning it over and over in his mind. It takes possession of his very soul, but he is not in his studio, or it is not convenient to put his divine vision upon canvas, and the picture gradually fades from his mind. A strong, vigorous conception flashes into the brain of the writer, and he has an almost irresistible impulse to seize his pen and transfer the beautiful images and the fascinating concept to paper. But it is not convenient at the moment, and while it seems almost impossible to wait, he postpones the writing. The images and the conception keep haunting him, but still he postpones. Finally the visions grow dimmer and dimmer, and at last fade away and are lost forever. There is a reason for all this. Why do we have these strong, vigorous impulses, these divine visions of splendid possibilities? Why do they come to us with such rapidity and vigor, such vividness and suddenness? It is because it is intended that we shall use them while fresh, execute them while the inclination is hot. Our ideas, our visions are like manna of the wilderness, which the Israelites were obliged to gather fresh every day. If they undertook to hoard it, it became stale, the nourishment evaporated, the life went out of it. They could not use old manna. There is something about allowing a strong resolution to evaporate without executing it that has a deteriorating influence upon the character. It is the execution of a plan that makes stamina. Almost anybody can resolve to do a great thing. It is only the strong, determined character that puts the resolve into execution. If we could only make our highest moments permanent, what splendid things we should do in life, and what magnificent beings we should become. But let our resolutions cool, our visions fade, until it's more convenient to execute them, and they're gone. There is no easier way in which one can hypnotize or deceive himself than by thinking that because he is always making great resolutions, he is doing something worthwhile or carrying them out. I know a man who would feel insulted if anyone were to intimate that he had not been a hard worker, and had not accomplished a great deal in life. And yet, although he is an able man, his whole life has been spent in jumping out of one thing into another so quickly that one could scarcely see the change. Yet every time you see him he carries his head high. He is as enthusiastic and optimistic as though his whole life had been one triumphant march. His enthusiasm is intense, but it fades away just as quickly as it came. The very fact that he always lives in the clouds, is always dreaming of the great things he is going to do, seems to convince him that he actually does them. But he never stays at one thing long enough to reach effectiveness. His whole life has been spent in starting things brilliantly and enthusiastically. Few men have ever begun so many things as he, or completed so few. The putting off habit will kill the strongest initiative. Too much caution and lack of confidence are fatal enemies of initiative. How much easier it is to do a thing when the purpose impels us, when enthusiasm carries us along than when everything drags in the postponement. One is drudgery, the other delight. Hungering and striving after knowledge is what makes a scholar. Hungering and striving after virtue is what makes a saint. Hungering and starving after noble action is what makes a hero a man. The great successes we see everywhere are but the realization of an intense longing, a concentrated effort. Everyone is gravitating toward his aim just in proportion to the power and intensity of his desire and his struggle to realize it. One merely desires to do this or that, or wishes he could, or would be glad if he could. Another knows perfectly well that if he lives, he's going to do the thing he sets his heart on, if it is within the limits of human possibility. We do not hear him whining because nobody will pay his way to college. He does not say he wishes to go. He says, "I am going to prepare myself for a great life work. I have faith in my future. I have made a vow to myself to succeed, and I am going to do so on a broad gauge plan. I am not going to start out half equipped, half fitted. I will have college training." When you find a boy who resolves within himself that come what will, he is going to do the thing he sets his heart on, and that there are no ifs or buts or ands about it, you may be sure he's made of winning stuff. He will not postpone and postpone the realization of his vision until too late, until its glory has vanished. He will lose no time in putting forth all his energy to make it real, and if it is a possible thing he will succeed. End of chapter 8. Of He Can Who Thinks He Can, by Orison Swett Marden. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Has your vocation your unqualified approval? I quote from the following sentence from a letter just received. In your February editorial, the following paragraph has impressed me mightily. To spend a life in buying and selling lies, or cheap, shoddy shams, is demoralizing to every element of nobility, to excellence in any form. Now I happen to be in the sham business and hate it so heartily that I want to get out of it as soon as I can do so with justice to others' interests. This young man, who gets more than $10,000 a year in salary, says that he is expected to trade upon the credulity of the poorer classes, who can ill afford to be preyed upon. And he continues, "While I need the money, I cannot enjoy this kind of work, nor can I write with conviction or ambition on projects which I naturally know to be fakes. Besides, I am afraid of the very thing pointed out in your editorial, namely growing down to the work. I hate hypocrisy worse than any other thing, and I cannot do my best work in any business based on such a foundation. I do not want to remain in an occupation which pays its highest salaries to the most skillful fakers. It is pitiable to see a strong, brilliant, promising young man, capable of filling a high position, trying to support himself and his family in an occupation which has not received his approval, which is lowering his ideals, which dwarfs his nature, which makes him despise himself, which strangles all that is best and noblest within him, and which is constantly condemning him and ostracizing him and his family from all that is best and truest in life. How often we hear a young man say, 'I do not like the business I am in. I know it has a bad influence on me. I do not believe in the methods used, or the deceptions practiced. I am ashamed to have my friends know what I am doing, and I say as little about it in public as possible. I know I ought to change, but it is the only business I understand in which I can earn as much money as I need to keep up appearances, for I have been getting a good salary, and I have contracted expensive habits of living, and I have not the force of character to risk a change.' Do not deceive yourself with the idea that somebody has got to do this questionable work, and that it might as well be you. Let other people do it, if they will. There is something better for you. The Creator has given you a guarantee, written in your blood and brain cells, that if you keep yourself clean and do that which He has indicated in your very constitution, you will be a man, will succeed, and will belong to the order of true nobility. But if you do not heed that edict, you will fail. You may get a large salary, but this alone is not success. if the almighty dollar is dragging its slimy trail all through your career, if money-making has become your one unwavering claim, you have failed, no matter how much you have accumulated. If your money smells of the blood of the innocent, if there is a dirty dollar in it, if there is a taint of avarice in it, if envy and greed have helped in its accumulation, if there is a sacrifice of the rights and comforts of others in it, if there is a stain of dishonor on your stocks and bonds, or if a smirched character looms up in your pile, do not boast of your success, for you have failed. Making money by dirty work is bad business, gild it how we will. There are 1,000 indications in you that the Creator did not fit you for what is wrong, but only for the right. Do the right, and all nature, all law, and all science will help you, because the attainment of rectitude is the plan of the universe. It is the very nature of things. Reverse it, and all these forces are pledged to defeat you. To the young men who have written for advice, let me say that if you are making money by forcing yourself by sheer willpower to do what you loathe, what does not engage your whole heart, or that into which you cannot fling your entire being, because you fear that it is not quite right, you can do 1,000 times better in an occupation which has your unreserved, unqualified consent. If you refuse to smirch your ability, no matter what the reward, you will thereby increase your success power 1,000-fold. The very fact that you can come out of a questionable situation boldly and take a stand for the right, regardless of consequences, will help you immeasurably. The greater self-respect, increased self-confidence, and the tonic influence which will come from the sense of victory will give you the air of a conqueror instead of that of one conquered. Nobody ever loses anything by standing for the right with decision, with firmness, and with vigor. You have a compass within you, the needle of which points more surely to the right and to the true than the needle of the mariner points to the pole star. If you do not follow it, you are in perpetual danger of going to pieces on the rocks. Your conscience is your compass, given you when you were launched upon life's high seas. It is the only guide that is sure to take you safely into the harbor of true success. What if a mariner should refuse to steer by the pointing of his compass, declaring it to be all nonsense, that the needle should always point north, and should pull it around so that it would point in some other direction, fasten it there, and then sail by it? He would never reach the port in safety. It takes only a little influence, just a little force, to pull the needle away from its natural pointing. Your conscious compass must not be influenced by greed or expediency. You must not trammel it. You must leave it free. The man who tampers with the needle of his conscience, who pulls it away from its natural love, and who tries to convince himself that there are other standards of right, other stars as reliable as the pole star of his character, and proposes to follow them in some questionable business, is a deluded fool who invites disaster. Every little while I meet young men who dislike to tell me what their vocation is. They seem ashamed of what they are doing. One young man I met some time ago very reluctantly told me that he was a bartender in a large saloon. I asked him how long he had been there, and he said about 6 years. He said he hated the business, it was degrading, but that he was making pretty good money, and just as soon as he could get enough laid up so that he could afford it, he was going to quit and go into something else. Now this young man had been deceiving himself for years by thinking he was doing pretty well, and that he would soon leave the business. There is something very demoralizing to the whole nature in doing that against which the better self protests. An effort to reconcile the ideal with that which we cannot respect is fatal to all growth. This is the reason why men shrivel and shrink instead of expanding when they are out of place. A man does not grow when a large part of him is entering its protest against his work. A volunteer makes a better soldier than a drafted man. A great many young men try to justify themselves and check inward protests by the perpetual self-suggestion that it is better to keep on for the present, in questionable occupations, because the great financial reward will put them in a position to do better later. This is a sort of sedative to the conscience, to keep it quiet until they can afford to listen to it. Do not deceive yourself by the expectation of making clean money in a dirty occupation. Do not deceive yourself either, by thinking you can elevate a bad business, or make it respectable. Many a man has thus been dragged down to his ruin. Some occupations are so demoralizing, brutalizing, and hardening, that even a Lincoln could not make them respectable. If what you are doing is wrong, stop it. You have nothing to do with it. If you are in doubt, or if you suspect that you are warping your conscience, give yourself the benefit of the doubt. Take no chances with it. Leave it before it's too late. Long familiarity with a bad business will make it seem right to you. If it is very profitable, it will at last hush your doubts and blunt your moral faculties. It will make you feel that there is compensation in pursuing it, at least until capital is accumulated for something else. Besides, the philosophy of habit that is every repetition of an act makes it more certain that it will be repeated again and again, quickly making the doer a slave. In spite of the protests of your weakened will, the trained nerve centers continue to repeat the acts even when you abhor them. What you at first choose, at last compels you. You are as irrevocably chained to your deeds as the atoms are chained by gravitation. So, my friends, when you are thinking of engaging in an occupation which is a little questionable, and which does not get the complete consent of your faculties, do not forget this tremendous gripping power of habit, which, when you may wish to change, will pull like a giant to get you back into the old rut. You have no right to choose an occupation which calls into play your inferior qualities, the lying, cunning, overreaching, scheming, long-headed, underhand qualities, those which covet and grasp and snatch, and never give, while all that is noblest in you shrivels and dies. If you have already made a wrong choice, why should you remain in an occupation which does not have your unqualified approval, or in one of which you are ashamed, and in which you have to stretch your conscience every day to make deceitful statements and false representations to influence purchasers unduly, to induce them by a smooth manner and a lying tongue to do that which you know is not for their advantage, and for which you will reproach yourself afterwards? Why should you desecrate your manhood and pervert your ability in a contemptible occupation, when there are so many clean, respectable vocations which are searching for your ability and hunting for your talent? You say that it is hard for you to change. Of course it is hard to jog along in humdrum toil for the sake of being honest when acquaintances all around are getting rich by leaps and bounds. Of course it takes courage to refuse to bend the knee to questionable methods, lies, schemes, and fraud, when they are so generally used. Of course it takes courage to tell the exact truth when a little deception or a little departure from the right would bring great temporary gain. Of course it takes courage to refuse to be bribed when it could be covered up by a little specious mystification. Of course it takes courage to stand erect when by bowing and scraping to people with a pole you can get inside information which will make you win what you know others must lose. Of course it takes courage to determine never to put into your pocket a dirty dollar, a lying, deceitful dollar, a dollar that drips with human sorrow, or a dollar that has made some poor gullible wretch poorer, or has defeated another's cherished plans, or robbed him of ambition or education. But this is what character is for. This is what manhood means. This is what backbone and stamina were given us for, to stand for the right and oppose the wrong, no matter what the results. Wear threadbare clothes if necessary. Live on one meal a day in a house with bare floors and bare walls if you must, but under no circumstances ever consent to prostitute your manhood or to turn your ability to do an unclean thing. Dig trenches. Carry hod, work as a section hand on a railroad, shovel coal, anything rather than sacrifice your self-respect, blunt your sense of right and wrong, and shut yourself off forever from the true joy of living and the approbation which comes only from the consciousness of doing your level best to reach the highest that is possible to you. Do not choose that occupation which has the most money in it, the greatest promise of material reward, notoriety, or fame even. But choose that which will call out the man in you, and which will develop your greatest strength and symmetry of manhood, personal nobility. Manhood is greater than wealth, and grander than fame. Personal nobility is greater than any calling, or any reward that it can bring. End of chapter 9. Of He Can Who Thinks He Can, by Orison Swett Marden. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Stand for something. The greatest thing that can be said of a man, no matter how much he has achieved, is that he has kept his record clean. Why is it that in spite of the ravages of time, the reputation of Lincoln grows larger and his character means more to the world every year? It is because he kept his record clean, and never prostituted his ability nor gambled with his reputation. Where, in all history, is there an example of a man who was merely rich, no matter how great his wealth, who exerted such a power for good, who was such a living force in civilization, as was this poor backwoods boy? What a powerful illustration of the fact that character is the greatest force in the world! A man assumes importance and becomes a power in the world just as soon as it is found that he stands for something, that he is not for sale, that he will not lease his manhood for any salary, for any amount of money, or for any influence or position, that he will not lend his name to anything which he cannot endorse. The trouble with so many men today is that they do not stand for anything outside their vocation. They may be well educated, well up on their specialities, may have a lot of expert knowledge, but they cannot be depended upon. There is some flaw in them which takes the edge off their virtue. They may be fairly honest, but you cannot bank on them. It is not difficult to find a lawyer or a physician who knows a good deal, who is eminent in his profession, but it is not so easy to find one who is a man before he is a lawyer or a physician, whose name is a synonym for all that is clean, reliable, solid, substantial. It is not difficult to find a good preacher, but it is not so easy to find a real man, sterling manhood, back of the sermon. It is easy to find successful merchants, but not so easy to find men who put character above merchandise. What the world wants is men who have principle underlying their expertness, principle under their law, their medicine, their business, men who stand for something outside of their offices and stores, who stand for something in their community, whose very presence carries weight. Everywhere we see smart, clever, long-headed, shrewd men, but how comparatively rare it is to find one whose record is as clean as a houndstooth, who will not swerve from the right, who would rather fail than be a party to a questionable transaction. Everywhere we see business men putting the stumbling blocks of deception and dishonest methods right across their own pathway, tripping themselves up while trying to deceive others. We see men worth millions of dollars filled with terror, trembling lest investigations may uncover things which will damn them in the public estimation. We see them cowed before the law like whipped spaniels, catching at any straw that will save them from public disgrace. What a terrible thing to live in the limelight of popular favor, to be envied as rich and powerful, to be esteemed as honorable and straightforward, and yet to be conscious all the time of not being what the world thinks we are, to live in constant terror of discovery, in fear that something may happen to unmask us and show us up in our true light. But nothing can happen to injure seriously the man who lives foursquare to the world, who has nothing to cover up, nothing to hide from his fellows, who lives in a transparent, clean life, with never a fear of disclosures. If all his material possessions are swept away from him, he knows that he has a moment in the hearts of his countrymen, in the affection and admiration of the people, and that nothing can happen to harm his real self because he has kept his record clean. Mr. Roosevelt early resolved that, let what would come, whether he succeeded in what he undertook or failed, whether he made friends or enemies, he would not take chances with his good name. He would part with everything else first. That he would never gamble with his reputation, that he would keep his record clean. His first ambition was to stand for something, to be a man. Before he was a politician or anything else, the man must come first. In his early career, he had many opportunities to make a great deal of money by allying himself with crooked, sneaking, unscrupulous politicians. He had all sorts of opportunities for political graft, but crookedness never had any attraction for him. He refused to be a party to any political jobbery, any underhand business. He preferred to lose any position he was seeking, to let somebody else have it, if he must get smirched in the getting it. He would not touch a dollar, place, or preferment unless it came to him clean, with no trace of jobbery on it. Politicians who had an axe to grind knew it was no use to try to bribe him, or to influence him with promises of patronage, money, position, or power. Mr. Roosevelt knew perfectly well that he would make many mistakes and many enemies, but he resolved to carry himself in such a way that even his enemies should at least respect him for his honesty of purpose, and for his straightforward, square-deal methods. He resolved to keep his record clean, his name white, at all hazards. Everything else seemed unimportant in comparison. In times like these, the world especially needs men as Mr. Roosevelt, men who hew close to the chalk line of right and hold the line plumb to truth, men who do not pander to public favor, men who make duty and truth their goal and go straight to their mark, turning neither to the right nor to the left, though a paradise tempt them. Who can ever estimate how much his influence has done toward purging politics and elevating the American ideal? He has changed the viewpoint of many statesmen and politicians. He has shown them a new and better way. He has made many of them ashamed of the old methods of grafting and selfish greed. He has held up a new ideal, shown them that unselfish service to their country is infinitely nobler than an ambition for self-aggrandizement. American patriotism has a higher meaning today because of the example of this great American. Many young politicians and statesmen have adopted cleaner methods and higher aims because of his influence. There is no doubt that tens of thousands of young men in this country are cleaner in their lives, and more honest and ambitious to be good citizens, because here is a man who always stands for the square deal, for civic righteousness, for American manhood. Every man ought to feel that there is something in him that bribery cannot touch, that influence cannot buy, something that is not for sale, something he would not sacrifice or tamper with for any price, something he would give his life for if necessary. If a man stands for something worthwhile, compels recognition for himself alone, on account of his real worth, he is not dependent upon recommendations, upon fine clothes, a fine house, or a pull. He is his own best recommendation. The young man who starts out with the resolution to make his character his capital and to pledge his whole manhood for every obligation he enters into will not be a failure, though he wins neither fame nor fortune. No man ever really does a great thing who loses his character in the process. No substitute has ever yet been discovered for honesty. Multitudes of people have gone to the wall trying to find one. Our prisons are full of people who have attempted to substitute something else for it. No man can really believe in himself when he is occupying a false position and wearing a mask. When the little monitor within him is constantly saying, "You know you are a fraud. You are not the man you pretend to be." The consciousness is not being genuine, not being what others think him to be, robs a man of power, honeycombs the character, and destroys self-respect and self-confidence. When Lincoln was asked to take the wrong side of a case, he said, "I could not do it. All the time while talking to that jury I should be thinking, 'Lincoln, you're a liar. You're a liar,' and I believe I should forget myself and say it out loud." Character as capital is very much underestimated by a great number of young men. They seem to put more emphasis upon smartness, shrewdness, long-headedness, cunning, influence, a pull, than upon downright honesty and integrity of character. Yet why do scores of concerns pay enormous sums for the use of the name of a man who, perhaps, has been dead for half a century or more? It is because there is power in that name, because there is character in it, because it stands for something, because it represents reliability and square dealing. Think of what the name of Tiffany, of Park and Tilford, or any of the great names which stand in the commercial world as solid and immovable as the Rock of Gibraltar, are worth. Does it not seem strange that young men who know these facts should try to build up a business on a foundation of cunning, scheming, and trickery, instead of building on the solid rock of character, reliability, and manhood? Is it not remarkable that so many men should work so hard to establish a business on an unreliable, flimsy foundation, instead of building upon the solid masonry of honest goods, square dealing, and reliability? A name is worth everything until it is questioned, but when suspicion clings to it, it is worth nothing. There is nothing in this world that will take the place of character. There is no policy in the world, to say nothing of the right or wrong of it, that compares with honesty and square dealing. In spite of, or because of, all the crookedness and dishonesty that is being uncovered, of all the scoundrels that are being unmasked, integrity is the biggest word in the business world today. There never was a time in all history when it was so big, and it is growing bigger. There never was a time when character meant so much in business, when it stood for so much everywhere as it does today. There was a time when the man who was the shrewdest and sharpest and cunningest in taking advantage of others got the biggest salary. But today the man at the other end of the bargain is looming up as never before. Nathan Strauss, when asked the secret of the great success of his firm, said it was their treatment of the man at the other end of the bargain. He said they could not afford to make enemies, they could not afford to displease or take advantage of customers, or to give them reason to think that they had been unfairly dealt with, that in the long run the man who gave the squarest deal to the man at the other end of the bargain would get ahead fastest. There are merchants who have made great fortunes, but who do not carry weight among their fellow men because they have dealt all their lives with inferiority. They have lived with shoddy and shams so long that the suggestion has been held in their minds until their whole standards of life have been lowered. Their ideals have shrunken. Their characters have partaken of the quality of their business. Contrast these men with the men who stood for half a century or more at the head of solid houses, substantial institutions, men who have always stood for quality in everything, who have surrounded themselves not only with ability, but with men and women of character. We instinctively believe in character. We admire people who stand for something, who are centered in truth and honesty. It is not necessary that they agree with us. We admire them for their strength, the honesty of their opinions, the inflexibility of their principles. The late Carl Schurz was a strong man and agonized many people. He changed his political views very often, but even his worst enemies knew there was one thing he would never go back on, friends or no friends, party or no party, and that was his devotion to principle as he saw it. There was no parleying with his convictions. He could stand alone, if necessary, with all the world against him. His inconsistencies, his many changes in parties and politics, could not destroy the universal admiration for the man who stood for his convictions. Although he escaped from a German prison and fled his country, where he had been arrested on account of his revolutionary principles when but a mere youth, Emperor William I had such a profound respect for his honesty of purpose and his strength of character that he invited him to return to Germany and visit him, gave him a public dinner, and paid him great tribute. Who can estimate the influence of President Eliot in enriching and uplifting our national ideas and standards through the thousands of students who go out from Harvard University? The tremendous force and nobility of character of Phillips Brooks raised everyone who came within his influence to higher levels. His great earnestness in trying to lead people up to his lofty ideals swept everything before it. One could not help feeling while listening to him and watching him that there was a mighty triumph of character, a grand expression of superb manhood. Such men as these increase our faith in the race, in the possibilities of the grandeur of the coming man. We are prouder of our country because of such standards. It is the ideal that determines the direction of life. And what a grand sight, what an inspiration, are those men who sacrifice the dollar to the ideal. The principles by which the problem of success is solved are right and justice, honesty and integrity, and just in proportion as a man deviates from these principles, he falls short of solving his problem. It is true that he may reach something. He may get money, but is that success? The thief gets money, but does he succeed? Is it any honester to steal by means of a long head than by means of a long arm? It is very much more dishonest, because the victim is deceived and then robbed, a double crime. We often receive letters which read like this: I am getting a good salary, but I do not feel right about it somehow. I cannot still the voice within me that says, wrong, wrong, to do what I am doing. Leave it, we always say to the writers of these letters. Do not stay in a questionable occupation, no matter what inducement it offers. Its false light will land you on the rocks if you follow it. It is demoralizing to the mental faculties, paralyzing to the character, to do a thing which one's conscience forbids. Tell the employer who expects you to do questionable things that you cannot work for him unless you can put the trademark of your manhood, the stamp of your integrity, upon everything you do. Tell him that if the highest thing in you cannot bring success, surely the lowest cannot. You cannot afford to sell the best thing in you, your honor, your manhood, to a dishonest man or a lying institution. You should regard even the suggestion that you might sell out for a consideration as an insult. Resolve that you will not be paid for being something less than a man, that you will not lease your ability, your education, your inventiveness, your self-respect for a salary, to do a man's lying for him, either in writing advertisements, selling goods, or in any other capacity. Resolve that, whatever your vocation, you are going to stand for something, that you are not going to be merely a lawyer, a physician, a merchant, a clerk, a farmer, a congressman, or a man who carries a big money bag, but that you are going to be a man first, last, and all the time. End of chapter 10.